So good morning, students. We'll start our unit number 3, which is planning and organizing construction sites and resources. The first topic number 1 is site. So the first topic of site is site layout, including enabling structures. So site layout enabling structures. Site layout plans are prepared by contractors as their mobilization activities before work on the site commences. So they are a crucial part of construction management, as sites can be very complex places involving the coordination and movement of large quantities of materials as well as high value products, plant and people. Effectively and accurately laying out a site can help ensure that the works are undertaken efficiently and safely. So careful sizing and positioning of temporary facilities can help reduce travel times, congestion, waiting times, and so on. And it also helps to make the site a more effective workplace with better worker morale. Next, site planning. Next, site planning layout involves the 4 basic processes cited below. The first one is identifying the site facilities that will be required. Second one, determining the sizes and other constraints of those facilities. Third one, establishing the interrelationships between the facilities. And the last one, optimizing the layout of the facilities on the site. Next, site layout plans might include locations for and the sizes of the following. First one, zones for particular activities. Second, cranes, including radiuses and capacities. Third one, site offices. Fourth one, welfare facilities. Fifth one, offloading, temporary storage in storage areas, basically a laydown area. Next, subcontractor facilities. Next, car parking. And the last one is emergency routes and master points. Then, access, entrances, security and access controls, temporary roads and separate pedestrian routes. Then, vehicle wheel washing facilities, waste management and recycling areas, side hoardings and existing boundaries, protection for trees, existing buildings, neighboring buildings and so on, signage, that is signboards, then temporary services which may include electrical power, lighting, water distribution, drainage information and communication technology, site security systems and so on. Then temporary works such as propping solutions to retain structures, sheet piling details and so on. Then areas for the construction of mock-ups for testing and then fabrication facilities. So as the site changes in nature during the course of these works, there may be a number of different site layout plans for different phases, and there may be more detailed plans showing particularly complex areas or sequences or describing their specific functions. The use of building information modeling, that is BIM, can help describe the construction site in 3 dimensions and through different phases effectively by creating a virtual construction site model. The next topic is developing site organization. So a construction organization, that is a site organization, consists of the site administration, field controls, field engineering, field material control, construction supervision, and in construction supervision includes the subcontractor management, safety of the site, quality control and inspection, pre-commissioning team and handover team, etc. So the construction management organization is normally a project task force, abbreviated as TF organization, and it is a full-time assignment. Site organization is a detailed and well thought out process which ensures a healthy and safe construction site throughout its building. Next, construction site traffic management. The first one, keeping pedestrians and vehicles apart on a construction site. Failing to plan adequately for both vehicles and pedestrians on site is one of the main causes of accidents during construction work. So the following points can help greatly reduce the pedestrian or vehicle accidents. Entrances and exits, making sure there are separate entryways and exits for pedestrians and vehicles. Walkways and crossings. When providing pedestrian walkways, you should make sure that they are well drained to avoid and slips and take a direct route. If a walkway crosses a roadway, then a clearly signed and lit crossing needs to be put in place. Next, obstructions, visibility, and barriers. If drivers are driving onto a public road, they first need to make sure there are no pedestrians either side of the vehicle before pulling away. With this in mind, it is also advised not to put anything on the pathways which will cause pedestrians to step onto the road to incoming traffic. So it's also worth thinking about installing barriers between roadways and pathways. Next, minimizing the vehicle movements on a construction site. Minimizing the movement on construction sites takes very careful planning but greatly reduces the risk of accidents or injuries. So considering the following, that is, providing car and van parking for any workers or visitors away from the work area, controlling entry to the work site, a separate storage area for delivery drivers so that they do not have to drive across the site. Next, visibility can be an issue on construction sites, especially if having to drive or reverse round corners, so we should consider the following aids to help. Mirrors, reversing alarms or CCTV cameras, train signalers, and adequate lighting. Next topic, protecting the public on construction sites. So site access to the construction site. As construction sites can be very dangerous to unauthorized personnel such as the public, the following steps should be taken to ensure safety. First one, boundaries. It is imperative that we define boundaries to the construction site physically. The fencing should suit the nature of the construction site and its immediate surroundings. So things to think about when planning the boundaries are: what nature is the construction site? How densely populated is the area? Who needs to visit the construction site? Next, authorization. Preventive measures should be taken to restrict unauthorized people from accessing the construction site. Even authorized people may be restricted to certain areas, and some may have to be supervised at all times while visiting the site. So that's all for this lecture. The remaining part of the topic will continue in our next class. Till then, you can give your name, address, and enrollment ID in the chat box for your attendance. Thank you.
AR6512. Presentation outline. First, we are going to get introduced about this chapter, and then we are going to move about seeing preparing site plan, and then we are seeing organizing land use with the site. So, first, how do you prepare the site plan? An overall master plan is prepared for the site, incorporating all design elements. This provides a framework for all activities that will take place within the market. Following points should be covered. So while you're making a master plan, we need to understand where your site is and what type of design elements your site is going to require. So here in this whole presentation, we are going to take an example of a market and we are going to compare each and every design element a market space might need. So market is a case example to understand what are different site principles and site layout has to be followed. All relevant design information obtained during the previous stages should be gathered together. First hand information and all your site planning and research that you have done, everything has to be segregated and has to be noted down before you start with the design. The site design should be organized to reflect the road system inside the market, should be designed to maximize efficient circulation. So when you start your site planning, you must make sure your main roads, from your main roads, how the crowd is going to come inside the market and how your crowd is going to get distributed to various places and how they are going to go out. So this comes under road systems. This is addressed within the site. So we need to take care of public transportation, public movement and private movement, how goods and how different goods and services are going to come inside and how water is going to come inside and go out of the site. And also we need to take care of drainage and sewage treatment plants, how things are going to be taken outside of the site. Supplementary uses such as public space and landscaping should be incorporated into the site plan. While making these improvements, we should make sure we have public spaces for the people to gather inside and for people to move from these public spaces to their private shops. And also we must have green spaces as breakout points while you are making site design. The site plan should be finalized. Changes made during the detailed design of buildings and infrastructure should be incorporated. When you are making site plan, there might be a lot of design changes that you are making. While you make the design change, you must ensure your site plan is also getting revised. So initially you might have planned for your building to open on one side, but while you are making your design, you must understand, you might come up with a new change saying there might be one more entry to your site on other side of the building. So you must ensure your road or you have access to the other side as well. So it goes hand in hand. Preparing the site plan, site development principle. The next stage after choosing the site is to prepare a draft master plan. This is the method of organizing different uses on the site and should incorporate all the needs of the user and take account of the factors that influence the management and operation of the market. We must understand what are the development principles that we are going to address while you are designing for a market space, for example. So you must understand what is the need and what is the call that we are going to address. So we have to make sure it influences the whole management and operation. A good plan reflects these factors as well as provides the maximum benefit for the minimum investment. When you are designing something, there is n number of design opportunities that can be followed, but you need to make sure you are using you're choosing the best one with the minimum cost. That is the ideal design solution for every aspect. A bad plan can hinder the market's operation. At this point, the plan will only be tentative. So when you are preparing the plan, it has to be tentative, so it can be flexible to change and the development or to make maximum benefit out of the space to which you are going to design. Market development is often an ongoing process. At first, there may be an open market in the street or on the piece of vacant land with temporary stalls. This may be followed by the construction of simple shed. So when you are taking market as an example, initially there might be small stalls which is temporary sheds, and eventually as market gets lot of people coming in, a lot of people are getting attracted to use the market, the temporary stalls will get converted into a permanent market settlement. So this is a continuous evaluation process. Assuming sufficient land is available, the market might gradually provide more specialized facilities, justifying the provision of covered market buildings. As market gets developed, there might be different classification, or the market can be specialized to certain activities. Say for example, a market can be completely just for flowers or just for vegetables or meat market. So or it can address to different, or it can also address to all this together in one space. So it is constantly changing and an evolving space. So as you see here, initially it is just a temporary space, and as it gets attracted by a lot of people, it then changes to a permanent building. A small rural market might start with a building or a perimeter wall and provision of paving and rubbish collection facility. Covered stalls might be built when the resources are available. The site plan will need to take into account this evolution. So when you're making a site plan, you must be sensitive that it is prone to development. So the space that is being provided for one shop will eventually increase, and it might occupy the next shop as well and become one huge shop. So as designers, we must ensure it is all in modules. So when it is improved, together as 1x is getting developed as 2x, and it does not affect the overall planning process. Initial lack of resources may mean that it wouldn't be possible to meet all the needs of the user, but provision should be made so that they can be accommodated in the future. Even though there may be lack of resources such as funding, or if it does not have proper amenities, we must be always be able to improve it in the future. But designers should be sensitive, so that sensitive while designing, so that these improvements can be incorporated in the future. For example, if the place just have public transportation system and it does not have any parking space, it should have a space which can be used in the future as private parking spaces. Say for example, there are 3 shops which can be replaced somewhere else, and the space that was initially occupied by these 3 shops can be used for parking spaces. So gather design data. It is necessary to gather all information that has been assembled during the previous stage. The social, physical, institutional factors that need to be considered in preparing the site plan are site analysis map showing geometry of the site, its boundary, whether it is flat or sloping, and the position of vehicular pedestrian access point. So these are basic research data. It is very similar to what we will be following, but what we have discussed in our earlier presentation. It is the first hand information. So where your public transportation is located and what is happening around your site, and if your site has all the amenities, all this data has to be gathered first. Map showing the surrounding land use, infrastructure facilities such as main drains, sewers, overhead power lines, adjacent buildings, and bus stops. So since it is going to be a market space, it is going to attract lot of crowd, and it is going to generate lot of sewages. So we must be sure the sewage can be taken out of the site, so there is provision for that, and we must ensure there is electricity in the site, and we must ensure it is not affecting the adjacent building, and adjacent buildings are not going to affect the new market proposal. And also bus stop. So since it is going to be a market, since public movement is going to happen constantly throughout the day, we must ensure it is close to your public transportation systems. Tabulation of the area of buildings required, the number of users, spaces, and list of any special facility that may be required, including environmental impact mitigation rule. So when you are making your proposal, you must make a tabulation in which you know how far these amenities are present and what can be done and improved in the future. Organizing land use. The purpose of this step is to reflect the view of the user on how the activities on the site might be organized for maximum efficiency, which can be done in the following stages: zoning land use, grouping sales outlet, temporary and small scale vendors. So you must make sure you zone even within your plot. Say for example, we are taking market as an example. We must ensure we organize the activity pattern or use of or based on type of shops within the market itself. So for the users it is very easy to buy their things and to get out, and they don't get lost when they are looking for something. The question of segregation assembly and retailing function is difficult issue. Few rural assembly market are used exclusively for assembly purpose, and main assemblers are also retail traders. Farmers bring their products to assembly market and often use the market's retail facility as well. When you're making this zoning land use, this can vary to each market type. There might be there might be spaces in which the farmers bring in their goods and they sell it to the people who are going to finally sell it in the actual market where the public are going to buy. So there are a lot of transition spaces, and we must ensure the facilities that is provided for the public usage and for the farmers and the retailers are different. And it can be together when it is a small market, but when it is a huge market we need to segregate these services and facilities. The mixing of assembly and retailing function in small market can be viable, particularly if the function are separated by time. Example, with the assembly taking place early in the morning before retailing starts. So we need to understand what time the goods are going to come in and what is going to happen from the time the goods come in to the time people are going to come inside the market. So for example, in markets usually they bring in all the vegetables and flowers at around early morning, say 4 o'clock, and people come inside the market only from 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. So before that they keep segregating all their places, all their different categories, and they mark pricing, and we must ensure we have space for all this as well. Another zoning issue is whether specialized use should remain in the general market or better located elsewhere. For example, it may be preferable for a meat market to be located adjacent to the slaughterhouse. So within a market we must ensure everything is zoned together and everything is being easily at a communicable distance. So if you are going to keep a meat selling point, it is good if it can be kept near to slaughterhouse. So when they cut the meat, it is easily taken to the slaughterhouse and it can be sold out there. The different selection of a market can be set up as follow: fresh fruit and vegetable retail trading areas, temporary sales areas for producers and assembly traders, meat, fish, poultry, egg sales, sales of grains, spices, sales of cooked food, other non-food sales such as clothing, household goods, general circulation areas, integral, external, and other uses such as storage, administration, and public toilets. So we must list down what are different activities and what are different pattern of sales that is going to happen within the market, and we need to design in such a way all these are grouped together, and it's not getting located haphazardly, so that people just come in and buy the space, buy what they want, and then they get out. It has to be in such a way, it has to pull the crowd till the end of the market, so they get to see everything that is available, all the facilities and all the products, and then they can buy, and then they can buy what they want, so that it is maximum beneficial for the sellers as well as for the users. Grouping sales outlet: the direction from which most customers arrive influence the location and grouping of stalls. Customers often come from main points such as bus stop or from the direction of more intensely populated area. So you must know where your market is being accessed, where your entry point is, and how you're going to group your shops within your market space. It is preferable that stalls for products that people buy on an almost daily basis, such as roots, tubers, fruits, vegetables, be located away from these approaches, so customers can be drawn into the market. So as I said earlier, this day-to-day usage product has to be kept little far away from the entry point, so that people are drawn towards till the end and they can see they can see everything that's happening. If retailers are grouped by type of products, competition will be greater, which should be beneficial for the customers. When you are going to group your shops according to the selling products, it is beneficial for the buyers. So if you're going to buy a vegetable and you're asking price at two different shop, you will obviously choose the one that is cheaper. So it develops a competition between these two sellers, and it is much more beneficial for the customer who are buying it. Temporary and small scale vendors. Small scale retailers or farmers often operate in the area surrounding a market, causing congestion, competition with the permanent retailers, as customers may find buying outside the market quicker. There are a lot of temporary moving carts or moving vendors that we usually see along the outside fringe wall of the market. So these people create major competition for the people who are selling their products inside the market, because when you're crossing the market, when you need to just buy one item, it is easier for you to buy it outside from these temporary vendors, so that you don't need to take your time to come inside and get it out, get your stuff outside. So these temporary vendors has to be addressed very sensitively. However, it is not desirable to remove such small scale traders, as they would lose their means of livelihood. So we cannot completely remove them, because even their livelihood is dependent on the small trading they are doing. These temporary vendors and producers sometimes operate during limited days of the week or limited season. So what can be done is, we can restrict their the number of days in which they can sell their products. Say for example, they can sell their products, they can use their temporary stalls only on alternative days of the week, or they can sell it only during weekends. So some type of such regulation can be made, so that it is creating a balance for the permanent sellers as well as these temporary vendors. Ideally, separate spaces within the market should be provided for them and daily license issued. So we can maybe allocate space within the market, so they do not disturb, they do not take away the opportunities for the permanent sellers, and they also have a good space, and they can get daily licensing, so that they can, with the license, they can use the space for just for one day, and when they need it, they have to get another license for one more day. So this can be a design solution that planners can ensure that is getting executed. Plan vehicular access and circulation. Easy access to the market is essential for efficient movement of goods and people. The best form of access is for public transport to be provided with a stopping point at the front of the site, and for service access to be provided at the side or rear of the premises. With a small rural market, this is achieved by providing an access road to one side of the market. Since if a market space is going to attract a lot of crowd, we must be sure it is very close to, or we have a bus stop right in front of the site, so it is easier for the public to use the market and go away from the market. And since market has different commodities to be bought within, we must also ensure we have good service roads that is connecting the market to the city, from which the products or the commodities can be transported and it can be bought into the site. A perimeter road around the market site, the typical market square. So if you have a back road which can be used completely for services, it is easier and it does not interfere with the public movement. For large market, an internal road system which has either shortcuts to other destination nor dead ends, that is cul-de-sac, could be provided. So if it is a large market, we should also be prepared to make a plan for internal roading systems. A road running through the center of the market area, that is effectively creating a market street, causes the most congestion, and it is not recommended option. So if you have a market area and you're going to create a huge vehicular movement road, it is going to people are going to stop everywhere, and they are going to start buying their commodities in the market, so which is going to create a huge traffic congestion, and it is not good for people who just want to pass the road. So you must ensure the road is not being it is free from traffic congestion. Parking. The basic layout of a rural market will depend on physical site condition, the level of investment, local cultural